Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about episodes 3 and 4 of Apple TV's Disclaimer. First off, I want to apologize for the delay in getting this video and all the other videos that I've been late in getting out. I want to apologize for getting those out so late. I've been working to get caught up, but then I immediately fall back behind. I just got to get into the same routines I was in when I first started the channel. There's a time where I woke up at 3 a.m. to watch an episode of Severance so I could record a video before I went to work. So I'm not trying to get back to that, but I do need to have like similar urgency so I can put more effort into finding the time. Anyway, now that the apologies are out of the way, let's talk about Disclaimer. And man, this show, it's so conflicting for me at this point. Like, there's some stuff that I absolutely love. At the same time, it's not doing anything that I hate necessarily, but it's doing stuff that I tried to talk myself into being okay with during the first 2 episodes that I fully decided I'm not okay with in these 2 episodes. And very rarely do I want to like a show. I let it be what it is. Like, if I like it, I like it. If I don't, I don't. But I really want to like this. I really don't like this show. The stuff it's doing that I like quite a bit. But I can't get on this camera in front of you guys and tell you that I think this show is fire when the stuff I don't like is getting more difficult to tolerate from one episode to the next. I also think I may have given this show too much credit in my review for the first 2 episodes regarding why a different actress was used for the younger version of Catherine rather than de-aging Cate Blanchett like they did Kevin Kline. Like, we learned pretty clearly why the younger version of Catherine is not played by a de-aged Cate Blanchett. I also think that my tepid acceptance of the narration as a means of kind of like likening the show to a book was me being too nice and forgiving because I wanted to like the show. The narration is getting distracting at this point, and distracting in a bad way. It's at the point where we have entire scenes where a character does absolutely nothing. They're having coffee, riding a bus, and the narration is telling us all sorts of shit while absolutely nothing is happening on the screen. Even worse, I can't ignore the fact that Catherine will be narrating Robert or Nick's thoughts that she couldn't possibly know. These are all intentional stylistic decisions, and they're crashing and burning in my opinion, which makes me lose faith in the show in other ways as well. Like, for example, this whole time I've been wondering how Jonathan had these events happen to him, he dies, and then someone who wasn't there and who he didn't talk to before he died arrives and writes a book about it. I initially looked at this as like a point of intrigue. Like, did he write this down or record it in some way and his mother found it? Did she simply find the pictures and create her own story? Is this going to be about, the differences in what actually happened versus what she said? But if she made it up, Catherine wouldn't be reacting the way she is. So now I'm starting to feel like it might just be a plot hole. And for me, that would completely kill the show. Like, I couldn't abide by that and say anything positive. Like, if that's not explained, the show is just a thumbs down for me, like flat out, regardless of anything that happens. And I would hate for a show that's doing a lot of stuff that's really good in many other ways to have such a massive self-inflicted wound like that. Hey everybody, I just want to take a small break from this review to talk about the various other ways you can engage with me on other platforms. If you're so inclined, and I understand why you wouldn't, I am an acquired taste, but you can join the Patreon where you can get extra content like retro reviews where I review old shows and movies to see if they still hold up today, Mike's Musings where I talk about shows I'm watching that I don't cover on the channel, or Mike's VOD where you can commission me to watch a show which I will then review on the channel. And if you want to engage with me and chat with me more directly, I also implore you to join the Discord and follow the Facebook page. I set up channels in the Discord for all of us to discuss the shows I'm reviewing on the channel, and I also drop new videos in there since it's the easiest platform for me to share to from my phone. The Facebook can be really fun because I sort of live comment on shows I'm watching, often while under the influence, I'm not going to lie. And I'll also share news there, both about television and film and about myself as well. So if you like my content, you want to be more engaged, you think I'm charming, or you simply want to show support, feel free to sign up for the Patreon or join the Discord or Facebook today. Links to all platforms are in every video description. Remember to share all my shit to your respective social media platforms. And now back to this review. So episode 3 opens where episode 2 left off with Robert driving away from Catherine. He's drinking, he's driving, he's distraught. And that's movie and film talk for this person's about to get in a car accident, so I immediately began writing Robert's obituary. But Robert doesn't die. He ends up sleeping in his car, and he walks to a nearby bus stop. And when he gets out of his car to walk, the camera's like all wobbly and shit, like, to mimic the idea of somebody who's drinking too much and is feeling woozy in the morning. And for the first but not last time, I found myself wondering, do I like this or is this too cute? And the second time would come shortly thereafter when Robert is on the bus. I alluded to this earlier, but when Robert's on the bus, we just see him sitting on the bus staring out the window. But then we have Catherine narrating Robert's thoughts on the bus. And he's like assessing and judging like these lowly individuals he's been reduced to sharing a bus with. And I'm watching this like nothing's happening on the screen. And Catherine is narrating thoughts that she couldn't possibly have access to. And this isn't even a flashback. Like, this is present day. Like, this just feels too cute for me. And I feel like there are less distracting ways of letting me know that Robert thinks he's better than the people on this bus. Like, I would already assume that based on what I already know about the character of Robert. Just, how he behaves, who he is. All it would take is like a gesture or a brief statement for me to make that connection. Instead, I had to sit and watch him stare out the window while someone who couldn't possibly know his thoughts in the moment tells me his thoughts in that moment. Like, I didn't care for it, and it was really distracting. And in episode 4, I've already got to move there since most of episode 3 was flashback scenes, which I'm going to get to. I'm going to get to Jonathan's scenes a little bit later. Robert's at a diner reading the book. And now Catherine is narrating, like, how the book is, like, making his dick hard in the middle of this restaurant. And, like, and at this point, I'm rolling my eyes because, again, she couldn't possibly know that. And even if I give them, like, creative license to, like, stretch the links of plausibility like that, it's just distracting for me now. And meanwhile, Catherine returns to work, and now that she understands what's going on, she tells her assistant, Jisoo, who we know from Squid Game, to stop looking into Steven. And side note, this has been a good year for Squid Game cast members. You got the main guy, he was in The Acolyte and that new Star Wars show, and now she's in this. But anyway, at this point, we're probably about midway through the 4th episode. And the Robert scenes have largely just been a waste. Like, just him sitting around reading the book while Catherine narrates shit she couldn't know. Like, where was Nick when Catherine was fucking Jonathan? And I'm just sitting there like, why couldn't Robert narrate that thought himself? Like, I don't know, man. It's bugging me. Especially since some of what she says is interesting and useful information. It was just a bit, it just be a bit more easily digested if I wasn't distracted by it coming from Catherine. Like, she talks about Robert being upset about his role as the husband in the book, reduced to someone not even worthy of a name. Like, I'd have loved to have heard that from Robert's narration. Like, I can't believe this happened. This whole time, I don't know. I don't want to keep harping on. I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit too much. You guys get the point. But this whole time that these scenes have been happening, he's been ignoring Catherine's calls and texts. And the episode ends with Catherine returning home to Robert being there with Nick. And Robert kicks Catherine out the house like real smooth by saying Nick is going to stay with him while she goes off to do the story that she has to do. And she can't say, like, I don't have a story. Like, she has to play along. And Robert says she doesn't deserve them as he hurries her out the door. Now, I know to this point, I've been pretty hard on the show, but it's because I want to get my gripes about the narration out of the way. I actually liked more about these 2 episodes than I dislike. It's just the stuff that I dislike is now stuff I dislike rather than stuff I'm unsure how I feel about. And there's a lot to like out of the flashback scenes aside from the obvious, and the present day stuff with Steven. The flashbacks open in episode 3 with the police arriving to tell Steven and Nancy about Jonathan's death, and right out of the gate, this shit made my stomach turn. Like, it was obvious as soon as they opened the door what was about to happen, and it was just as devastating as you'd expect it to be. We learned that Jonathan drowned in Italy, and now Steven and Nancy are being asked to go there to identify the body. And my immediate thought, who pays for that? Like, I feel like if my loved one dies in another country and I have to go there to identify them, I also shouldn't have to pay for that flight. Like fly them to me to identify or pay for my flight. Like, I'm grieving. Like, come on, fuck out of here. Anyway, prior to the police arriving, Steven had been working the grill, and after the scene plays out, they show corn burnt up on the grill. Like, well, this shit didn't matter anymore. Like, how insignificant is the food that he was making. And I thought that was kind of a nice little touch. When Stephen and Nancy go to identify the body, it's a unsurprisingly brutal scene. I don't mean brutal like violent, I mean emotionally brutal. Nancy gasps when they pulled the sheet back. And I'll never forget having the same completely uncontrollable reaction to seeing my father dead. Like, it wasn't the same as that. Like, he wasn't murdered. He wasn't like nothing like that. I didn't have to go identify a body. He was in hospice at the time. But he had only been there for like a couple of days, like literally like 2 days. And when I was told that he died, I went up there. I was at work at the time. I walked in the room and he was just laying there dead in the bed. And I'll never forget the completely like involuntary gasp that just escaped my body. So that shit's real as fuck. Like, even though you know what you're gonna see, that you don't have no control over that gasp. Like, it just like I don't know. It just happens. But there's a cut the shape of an X on Jonathan's arm that I'm hoping is gonna come back around at some point. But I guess we'll see. The Brickstocks then go to the hostel that Jonathan was staying at to collect his belongings. And while there, Nancy secretly, and I have no idea why she did this secretly, and that bothered me too, she pockets Jonathan's rolls of film. So another side note, another thing this show is doing that I can't quite figure out is why they keep having Steven open and close the freezer door on his refrigerator. And like, yeah, I get what he's doing. Like, it's rattling. He opens the door, closes it, the rattling stops. So it's his move for, like, you know, getting the rattling to stop. But why was that introduced as a feature within this show? Like, what purpose does it serve, or what purpose will it serve? Like, maybe it's meant to let us know, like, what kind of person Steven is. Like, he just can't let some shit go. He can't just let it rattle or get it fixed. Like, no matter how insignificant it is. But I don't know. I don't think a noisy fridge or a dead son is insignificant. So I don't know, man. I feel like I don't know what they're doing with that. Anyway, next time we see the Brickstocks in flashback form, they're back home in an understandable established pattern of sadness. There's an incredibly sad scene of Nancy seemingly trying to drown herself in the tub, but she says she needed to know what Jonathan felt. They said he died painlessly, but how could they know that? How did they know he didn't suffer? She wanted to feel it for herself. And man, that is so fucking sad. And that's one of the things this show does really well, is make everything feel so relatable and make you actually feel something inside yourself. And I'm gonna talk about another moment where that happens later. And I truly feel for Robert. I truly feel for Nancy. Like that thought of, like, did he suffer? That would stick with me for years. It would wreck me. So, like, I could totally understand that feeling. She said, you know, he must have been so frightened and so lonely. And that tendency to just, like, wallow in the worst thoughts imaginable. Like, I could see myself, or anyone for that matter, doing that too. And it just makes everything she's going through have so much more, like, emotional resonance. We later learned that Nancy has stopped working, and after a brief moment of positivity looking at the photographs that Jonathan took, not the good ones, things get much worse. Steven narrates that they spent the next 5 years, again, wallowing in grief. As they silently watch TV, Nancy up and decides that she's going to move into Jonathan's room and that they won't be discussing that. Like, it's just like, I'm going. Can we talk about it? Nope. We learned from Steven's narration in an earlier episode that she locks herself in there for an extended period, and we know that's also when she writes the book. They're no longer keeping up their house either. It's overrun with brush and weeds and fox. I'm like, what about, like, am I watching Last of Us right now? But then, after narrating that it smelled like cancer in there, which like that literally made me laugh out loud. It's something that you don't want to do in a scene about a mother grieving over her dead son. You probably don't want me laughing, but after he says that it smells like cancer in there, Steven tells us that Nancy finally died. And I literally wrote like LMAO in my notes during a scene about a mother dying of cancer and grief shortly after her son died. And I feel like that's probably not what they were going for, but mistakes were made. So, all right, let's move on to the flashbacks, the Jonathan and Catherine flashbacks. Like, I was considering being a dick and saving that for last, but that would just be cruel. We'll save Steven's modern day adventures for last. Not much happened there. So, the Jonathan flashbacks are the only scenes in the show that have this circular transition in and out of them. And I'm wondering if I've overthought the importance of those as well. Like, in my first video, I played up the idea that a major theme here is stories and stories, and that they need. We may end up hearing various versions of stories, various versions of these events that took place between Jonathan and Catherine. And a lot of traits in this show led me to believe that was going to be true, like the narration, the circular transitions, the Perfect Stranger book, books all over Catherine and Robert's house, the fact that Nancy shouldn't be able to write a book about what happened to Jonathan. But now I'm becoming increasingly concerned that all those things are just like shitty stylistic choices. Like I might have read too much into circular transitions for the Jonathan scenes. It may not be indicative of anything. It just might be some shit that an editor thought looked cool. And the idea that Nancy couldn't possibly know in explicit detail what happened between Jonathan and Catherine might just be some things that the folks who made this show don't give a fuck about. And yeah, like I said earlier, that had killed the show for me, honestly. So when I'm watching the start of these Jonathan Catherine scenes, in retrospect, I was probably reading too much into those two. Like, for example, I was pretty taken aback at how aggressive Catherine was toward Jonathan. And I thought, this could just be an aspect of Nancy's book that maybe she's over dramatized because she's not the married woman being seduced by a young man, she being Catherine. She is aggressively pursuing this kid, and this does not even jibe with the version of Catherine that I see today. But no, if this isn't what actually happened, why would the books be so upsetting to Catherine? Like, her internal narration has never said, this book is some bullshit. It wasn't like that. Her reaction has always been some real shit just came to light. She's never entirely denied this, so I have to take what I'm seeing here at face value. And I just don't like having every reason to believe that this is an overly romanticized version of what actually happened, but being forced to accept that it's not. Like, all through my notes for these scenes, I talked about how it felt like a work of fiction rather than a retelling of actual events. But having said that, the seduction here was top-notch, man. The Kylie Minogue scene, that was a wild moment that was a wild thing to be doing in public. Like, I'm surprised Catherine didn't hear, like, a loud knock from under Jonathan's side of the table. Because that was nuts. And I'm not going to go over everything that happened in these scenes in detail, at least not here, maybe on the Patreon. But we see how the infamous Polaroids get taken and learn about just what kind of sex these two are having. Like, this wasn't, like, have a fling with a rando on vacation sex. This was, like, life-changing sex for Jonathan. Like, that was way too high of a bar to set for someone that young. Like, had Jonathan lived, he probably never, it had been like that chasing that first cocaine high. Like, he never would have experienced sex of that caliber again, probably. But she leaves her room key for him. And when he arrives at her room, she, like, gets naked. She's covering her body. And she's like, come. And I'm like, oh, he's about to. Then she has him, like, untie her panties. And it's like when Vincent opened the suitcase in Pulp Fiction. It's like the glow that comes out of it. Yeah, nuts, man. So, like, yeah, there's oral, there's butt stuff, there's photography. It's no wonder Jonathan became obsessed and wanted to go back to London with her. It's also no wonder that Cate Blanchett wasn't simply de-aged for this, answering the biggest question that a lot of us had coming out of the first two episodes. And look, that actress who played young Catherine, she was hot. Cool. Those scenes were hot. No complaints, whatever. I fully understand how Jonathan became so obsessed. I'm just saying, I wouldn't have necessarily minded if it was Cate Blanchett either. I'll just leave it at that. I'd have been fine with it. So at the start of episode 4, Catherine needs to tell Jonathan proper etiquette for when you're cheating on your husband with your kid in the next room. And she tells him how they have to pretend to not know each other and how he's not to endear himself to Nick at all. In a piece of foreshadowing so heavy-handed that the Hulk might have written it, Jonathan asks, what if he can't pretend? And Catherine's like, I might have to kill you. Okay. All right, guys. Then immediately following Catherine saying, we have to pretend like we don't know each other, they walk to the beach. He sits 20 feet away from him. He sits 20 feet away from her, and she flashes bush and tit at him in front of her kid until she's riled herself up enough to go fuck him in the bathroom. I mean, this is a very classy lady, right? She's like, hey, stranger, can you watch my child while I go fuck this teenager in the bathroom? And I mean, man, like, the selfishness and irresponsibility of this woman is, like, record-breaking. It's chart-topping. What's funny about this moment, too, is after she asks a stranger to watch her kid, they cut back and forth to scenes of them fucking in his bathroom several times. And I think this was meant to build up tension, right? Because we're going to assume something happens to Nick while she's in there. But it felt to me, all I got from it was that they just been in there fucking for hours. And because it would leave, it would cut to like long scenes with Steven and come back and they still fucking, cut to another long scene, come back, they still fucking. And that's all I could think about was how long they were in there. Like, how long have they in there? But after they're finally done, that's what Jonathan is like, I'm coming to London. I don't even understand why you don't want me to. By the way, I already got my flight. And I was just like, this is why you don't give teenagers mind-blowing, life-altering sex. Like, this is exactly what's going to happen. But then they leave, and Nick is still sitting there chilling. And I'll put in my notes, well, I guess I don't know shit about fuck. And I'm like, man, they're drawing this out longer than Catherine expects Jonathan to withhold an orgasm. But Catherine sits back down and is like, shit, he hasn't been kidnapped or killed yet. Let me just go to sleep until he is. And when she wakes up, Nick's pretty deep into the water. Now, I've been fairly hard on these episodes so far, but I got to give props where it's due. And they filmed the shit out of these scenes of Jonathan in the water trying to save Nick. Like, the sound was astounding. It made you feel how strong the current was, how heavy the water was hitting Jonathan, how much he was being engulfed by it at every up and down of the water, or of the camera, I should say. Like, while watching it, it made me want to spit out water because it just felt that fucking real. Like, that was a really well done scene. Catherine watches, she says nothing, hoping that Jonathan will die and solve all of her self-created problems. But the lifeguards eventually bring him back to shore. And this scene was just as bad as the Jonathan in the water scene was good. The lifeguard is trying to resuscitate Jonathan, and it's dramatic, and everyone's wondering if this kid's gonna live. Like, who he tried to save this other kid. You gotta save him. That'd be terrible. He's a fucking hero. And all I'm doing is writing my notes. Why the fuck is the lifeguard bone fucking dry? Like, I rewound it because I'm like, let me make sure this guy was in the water. Let me make sure this isn't some different guy and I'm confusing him with someone else. Nope. The guy who was just in the water is completely bone dry. They say his name. Like, when he's in the water, he has a weird name. It's something like start with an A. It's like AU something. Like Aura. Like, they say his name in the water and then say it again while he's doing the CPR. And this was just a reminder to me, like, maybe I gave this show too much credit out the gate. Like, I thought it was doing all sorts of cool thematic shit, and this story was going to be layered as fuck. But 2 episodes later, I'm looking at the things that I looked past because I thought they were going to have deeper meaning, and going, maybe those things aren't clues to deeper parts of the story. Maybe they're just cute/pointless creative choices. Maybe you shouldn't assume there's a logical reason for Nancy being able to tell Jonathan's story. They just had a lifeguard jump out the water bone dry. Like maybe they don't realize that we're watching present day Stephen Brickstock execute on his plan and wondering why he's like playing a fucking character and doing so much acting for no reason when he could just drop a package off. Like, I guess I'm starting to wonder, like, maybe this is just bad. There's not some cool thing planned. But let me wrap this up by talking about present day Steven real quick, because there's something that happens in his plot line that belongs with the last few things I said as well. When we see Steven in episode 3, he wants to have his book prominently displayed in a very specific bookstore. And we later learn that he also wants to create a fake Facebook page of a teenage boy. And there's no way that's going to go wrong, right? Only good can come from that. An old white man making a fake Facebook page of a teenage boy. But later on, we learned that he wanted his book prominently displayed in this specific store because apparently Catherine frequents this store. Of course, my first thought was, how the fuck does he know that she goes to that specific bookstore? Followed by, I doubt the show thinks that matters. And that's just not a good sign. A lot's going to come down to these last 3 episodes. There's a lot to like here, but there are a lot of things that are also starting to feel like potential problems and things that are just flat out fucking problems. Now, I could be wrong, and the show could have all sorts of explanations and cool little unexpected shifts in the plot, but this thing is starting to feel like something that had a shit ton of potential, but is ultimately going to be a sloppily told story wrapped up in something really shiny and pretty. And that's the fast track to my disappointments list. So let me know what you thought in the comments. I will be back. I'm going to do episodes 5 and 6 in one video. That should be out. Today is Halloween. I should have had to look at the... Today's Halloween. probably tomorrow, November 1st, I'll have out. I've watched episode 5. It didn't have any impact on my notes. I'd already done my notes before I watched episode 5. So if anything I said is confirmed by episode 5 or 6 or rebuked in episode 5 or 6, I don't know, complete coincidence. I hadn't watched it when I did these notes. But I have now watched episode 5, and I'm going to watch episode 6 like now. So yeah, my goal is to get a video out for episodes 5 and 6 tomorrow, and then we'll do a video for the finale next week. So let me know what you thought about these 2 episodes in the comments, and until then, peace.